Today's tech news moves fast, but understanding it shouldn't be hard. That's why Snarful Solutions Group brings you Connecting the Dots, where we break down what's happening in tech and why it matters to you. Now, let's dive in with your hosts.
Welcome back to Connecting the Dots. I'm Alex.
And I'm Morgan.
And this is our special year-end edition where we try to step back from the day-to-day noise.
Right.
And really look at the big currents that reshape technology and, frankly, our daily lives over the last 12 months.
It's good to be here for this one. I feel like this year, 2025, it wasn't just another year of incremental updates.
No.
It felt like a real inflection point, a fundamental shift.
It absolutely did. And I think to understand it, you have to look at the 2 years before. 2023, 2024, they were all about what we called the unbridled exuberance of discovery.
Well, totally. That was the era of just build bigger.
The birth of generative AI, that frantic, almost hysterical gold rush for GPUs.
The prevailing belief was that scale solved every problem.
Just throw more compute, more money at it.
And that assumption is precisely what broke this year. 2025 is, I think, going to be remembered as the year of recalibration.
That's a great way to put it.
It's the year that all those theoretical boundaries, all those dreams of just infinite AI growth, they collided violently with the physical and economic realities of actually deploying this stuff.
And the security realities, too.
Absolutely. The security realities.
I find that framing so important. We didn't just see progress this year. We saw a fundamental restructuring
Of everything.
of the entire tech stack, of the regulatory landscape globally, and maybe most importantly, how these digital systems actually touch the physical world.
Exactly. So our mission today is to synthesize all of that. We're not just reading headlines. We're going to connect these seemingly separate threads, the breakthroughs, the crises, the policy shifts into one story.
The year of implementation.
The year of implementation. The goal is that you walk away with a really actionable understanding of the new landscape we're all operating in now.
We're talking about everything from a $5 million AI model that just humbled trillion-dollar companies
To a single bug in a configuration file that took 20% of the internet offline.
It's a story of efficiency, fragility, and the sudden massive split in how the world's governments think about technology.
It's the story of the rubber meeting the road. In a big way.
It really is. So before we jump into that first massive theme, the one that really reset the economics of AI, we want to thank our sponsor for making this year-end special possible. We are supported today by Old Glory, the iconic music and sports fan merch store.
The classic.
A true classic. If you're looking for that vintage concert t-shirt, a rare throwback jersey, or just gear for your favorite team, Old Glory is the place.
And they have an incredible offer for our listeners.
They do. If you head over to oldglory.com and use our promo code, you get 15% off your entire purchase.
That code is SNARFUL, S-N-A-R-F-U-L.
Snarful, all one word. It gets you 15% off everything at oldglory.com. Go check them out.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
We have to start with the biggest shock to the system this year, the thing that completely redefined AI. Let's talk about the algorithmic paradigm shift.
The efficiency shock.
The efficiency shock.
This is the story that changed the fundamental assumption of how you build and price artificial intelligence. For years, the dogma, the so-called scaling laws, was just incredibly simple.
Bigger is better.
Bigger is better. You needed more data, more parameters, and an exponential amount of compute power. We're talking over $100 billion in CapEx for GPUs and electricity.
The brute force hypothesis, it was the entire business model for the big US hyperscalers. Just keep building bigger data centers.
And intelligence will just sort of emerge from the pile.
Right.
That entire hypothesis just completely collapsed in January of 2025.
Yeah.
And it collapsed because of a single model.
DeepSeek R1.
DeepSeek R1. And it didn't come from Silicon Valley. It came from a research lab in Hangzhou, China.
And this was a genuine Sputnik moment for the entire industry.
It really was.
Yeah.
And you have to remember the context here. The U.S. companies were, and still are, operating under strict export controls on the most advanced hardware.
Specifically the NVIDIA H100s, the top-of-the-line chips.
Exactly. And DeepSeek proved to the world that you don't actually need unrestrained access to the best hardware if you just have smarter, more efficient algorithms.
The numbers are they're staggering when you compare them.
You really are. DeepSeek R1 was trained for a reported cost of just $5.6 million.
$5.6 million.
And yet, it achieved reasoning parity with models that cost, orders of magnitude more to build.
Sometimes it even surpassed them on certain benchmarks.
It did. And that massive gap between cost and performance,
Yeah.
that's the tension that defined the whole rest of the year in tech strategy.
So how did they do it? If they couldn't just throw bigger hardware at it, what was the magic trick?
It really comes down to two very specific, very powerful technical breakthroughs. The first one was the architecture of the model itself.
The mixture of experts, MOE.
Exactly. For years, models were dense. That means every single parameter, every neuron in the network was active every time you generated a single word. It's incredibly inefficient. DeepSeek R1 was a MOE design. It had this enormous total parameter count, 671 billion.
Which sounds huge, but that's not the important number.
Not at all. Because during any single calculation, only a tiny fraction of those parameters were actually active.
About 37 billion, right?
That's right, 37 billion. So think of it like a giant library with 671 billion books.
Okay.
In a dense model, to read one book, you have to turn on every single light in the entire library.
Which is incredibly wasteful.
Right. But in a MOE model, only the specific shelf, the expert that holds the book you need, lights up.
So you get all the knowledge of that massive library, but with the energy cost of just lighting up one small section.
Precisely. That sparsity is the key. It let them have this vast encyclopedic knowledge base without the insane latency and cost you'd normally get from a model that size.
Okay, so that's the architecture. What was the second breakthrough?
The second one was even more fundamental. It was in how they trained it. They used a new technique called Group Relative Policy Optimization, GRPO.
Right, and traditional reinforcement learning, the PPO technique everyone was using, it requires this second critic model.
It does. You have an actor model that does the work and a critic model that judges the actor's work.
And that critic model essentially doubles the amount of GPU memory you need during training, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It's a huge memory hog. And that's exactly the resource that was being constrained by the export controls.
So GRPO gets around that.
It gets around it entirely. Instead of needing a separate critic to tell the actor if it did a good job, GRPO just has the actor generate a group of possible outputs.
And then it compares them against each other?
It compares them against each other and uses their relative performance to figure out the best way forward. It's reinforcement learning without the memory doubling critic.
And that innovation let them train a world-class model on constrained hardware.
It did. And the market fallout from this was immediate and, frankly, brutal.
The pricing.
The pricing. DeepSeek's API didn't just compete. It forced a complete repricing of what intelligence costs across the entire industry.
They priced it at 55 cents per million input tokens.
Right. For context, that undercut the market leaders, like Google's Gemini 3 Pro, by a factor of almost 4.
That's not just competition. That's an existential threat to the high-margin business models of the big U.S. hyperscalers.
It completely changed the game. So the Western response couldn't just be to match on price.
They couldn't. It would have destroyed their margins.
So they had to differentiate. They had to pivot hard to where sheer costs couldn't compete.
Yeah.
And that was the frontier of what we call agentic power and massive context.
This is the strategic pivot of 2025.
It is. Google responded with its Gemini 3 family of models. And they focused on two things, context and multimodality.
They expanded that context window to over 1 million tokens.
1 million tokens, which is, it's hard to even comprehend. That's like feeding it hundreds of thousands of pages of text in a single go.
So you can reason over an entire company's internal wiki or years of legal documents or a massive software code base all at once.
It shifts the value from just answering a question to synthesizing an enormous metadata.
And they also introduced Google Anti-Gravity.
Right. A suite of tools pushing toward these fully agentic systems that could collaborate with developers, not just assist them. And Gemini 3 really cemented its lead in superior multimodal handling.
Meaning it could process video, audio, and text all at the same time, natively.
Exactly. You could literally watch a video, listen to the audio track, and read the transcript simultaneously to understand the content.
Meanwhile, Anthropic was carving out its own niche.
They doubled down on reliability and control. Their Claude Opus 4.5 series had a major breakthrough in what they called computer use.
Because it was huge.
It was. The AI could literally look at a screenshot of your computer screen, understand the software you're using, and then manipulate a virtual cursor to click buttons and type in fields.
It moved the AI out of the chat window and onto your actual desktop.
It did. It could now update a spreadsheet for you, or navigate some ancient internal ERP system, or manage your cloud console. That was the missing link for the agentic era.
And all of this fed into the big cognitive trend of the year, the move from predictive models to true reasoning models.
We finally moved past what they call System 1 thinking.
That fast, intuitive, but often hallucination-prone style of the early GPTs.
Right. And we moved into what really felt like System 2 thinking, deliberative, logical reasoning.
And the key technology there was the native use of chain of thought processing, COO.
That's right. These new models started generating a hidden internal monologue, a sort of thought trace.
So it would plan its approach, critique its own logic, and self-correct its mistakes before it ever showed you the final answer.
And that self-verifying, self-correcting nature was the absolute missing link for enterprise adoption.
All those companies that got burned by confident-sounding hallucinations in 2024 finally had a reason to trust the output for high-stakes work.
Legal analysis, financial modeling, things where a mistake is not an option.
And that leap in quality, kicked off by DeepSeek's efficiency shock, really sets the stage for our next major theme, the birth of the agentic economy.
That's the perfect transition. That move to System 2 reasoning is exactly what unlocked this second massive theme of 2025.
The agentic economy.
This is where the industry moved decisively past the chatbot. As we like to say, a chatbot answers a question. An agent pursues a goal.
It's about closing that loop between perception, cognition, and action.
Right.
Giving the AI hands and feet.
Right. An agent can perceive new data coming in, think about it using that chain of thought logic, and then take action.
And not just one action. It can plan a whole multi-step workflow.
Exactly. It can research a market, then draft a proposal based on that research, access an internal database for sales figures, write a little code patch, and then execute a final transaction.
All autonomously.
Or semi-autonomously. That's the key. And this wasn't just research anymore. The infrastructure for this became standardized in 2025.
We saw orchestration frameworks like Microsoft's AutoGen LangGraph and Crew AI become the go-to tools for developers.
These frameworks let you build essentially digital org charts. You could create a team of agents.
So you'd have a researcher agent that finds the data, a writer agent that drafts the summary,
and a manager agent to coordinate them and report the final result to a human. The promise was just immense productivity gains right out of the box.
In theory, yes. The anticipation was huge.
But 2025 is where we ran headfirst into the corporate adoption gap.
The productivity versus transformation gap.
Exactly. A big PwC survey found that 79% of companies claimed they were adopting AI agents.
But when you dug into it, most were stuck in the pilot phase.
Or they were just using them for really low-stakes internal tasks, like summarizing meetings.
So what was the friction? If the tech was so capable, why was the rollout of true transformation so slow?
In a word, trust.
The ghost of hallucinations past.
Precisely. The memory of those confident, completely wrong answers from 2024 was still very fresh. So while having an agent draft an internal email is pretty low risk.
Giving that same agent right access to your production customer database.
No way. The IT and compliance departments would absolutely balk at that. Or letting it deploy new code to customers or execute a $1 million financial transaction.
The risk of that 0.1% failure rate was just too high.
It was operationally and legally unacceptable. So the real-world outcome was that agents were widely deployed as co-pilots.
The human had to stay in the loop for that final approval.
Which prevented them from being truly autonomous digital workers, at least for anything mission-critical.
And this need for human oversight created a brand new job title, didn't it?
It did. We saw the rapid emergence of the agent orchestrator.
A human worker whose whole job is to manage, debug, and audit a fleet of these digital employees.
Right. Their job isn't just to use the agent. It's to make sure its actions are safe, traceable, and compliant with company policy. It's a brand new role born directly from that trust gap.
So while companies were hesitant to let agents run wild internally, the race to build the best agent platform was just frantic.
Oh, the external race was an all-out war. This led to the explosion of the acquire war.
Where you're not buying a company for its product, you're buying it for its people.
Exactly. Talent that understood how to build complex, reliable agents became the new gold. The tech giants saw this as the next great competitive moat.
Meta's acquisition of Menace, that Singapore-based startup, for $2 billion, that was a huge signal.
It was. It showed that geography was irrelevant. They were buying the talent. Menace was focused on building these general-purpose agents that could work across different software environments.
Meta basically bought their entire research team.
They did. And it wasn't just Meta. OpenAI acquired Statsig for over $1 billion.
And that wasn't for a consumer product.
Not at all. It was to get their engineering experimentation platform. It was about securing the ability to test and iterate on agent behaviors at scale, faster than anyone else.
So the strategy was clear. Even if we can't fully deploy them yet, we need to own the talent that can build them for the future.
Absolutely. 2025 made it clear that while DeepSeek might have commoditized basic reasoning, the ability to turn that reasoning into reliable action, that agent layer, was the new premium commodity.
And that reliance on reliable action on a system that's always on and always correct just threw a harsh spotlight on how fragile the foundations of the internet really are.
That's the perfect segue. The agentic economy demands 100% uptime. And in 2025, the underlying infrastructure violently disagreed with that demand.
That's putting it mildly.
This whole agentic future, totally dependent on real-time data and connectivity, was just rocked by a series of failures that exposed the alarming fragility of the centralized web.
I remember the feeling during those outages. It wasn't just an inconvenience. For a lot of businesses, it was a complete shutdown.
And what was so striking about the catastrophic cloud outages of 2025 is that they weren't caused by some sophisticated nation-state cyber attack.
No, they were internal configuration errors, human errors, systemic errors, the kind of thing that just shouldn't happen at that scale.
Let's start with the biggest one, the AWS DynamoDB outage on October 20th. This wasn't a blip. This was over 15 hours of downtime.
In the US East 1 region, which is basically the heart of the internet for a huge chunk of the world.
The number of affected users was historic, 17 million people. Think about the services that run there. Netflix, Snapchat, major banks.
Everything just stopped.
It was a global pause button. And the mechanism behind it was just this perfect lesson in technical humility. It was caused by a non-malicious internal race condition.
We should probably explain what a race condition is. It sounds technical, but the concept is actually pretty simple.
It's just a timing problem. Imagine you have two automated workers, a DNS planner and a DNS enactor, and they're both trying to update the same critical set of instructions.
The planner figures out the new configuration, the enactor applies it.
Right. But in this case, the enactor was too fast. It executed an old instruction to remove a bunch of critical infrastructure before the planner could finish giving it the new instructions.
It's like deleting the old version of a file a split second before the new version is finished saving. The file just disappears.
That's exactly what happened. The system effectively deleted its own address book, making the entire DynamoDB service invisible to the rest of the internet.
And here's where it gets really scary. The problem of the circular dependency.
This is the real lesson. DynamoDB is a foundational service. A lot of other AWS services use it to store their own operational data.
So when DynamoDB went down,
A ton of other things went down with it. But here's the kicker. The AWS Status Dashboard. The very tool they use to tell customers what's wrong.
it relies on DynamoDB.
It does. And so did many of their internal tools needed to fix the problem.
So the engineers couldn't even use their own tools to fix the broken service because the tools themselves were broken by the outage.
It's the ultimate circular dependency risk, and it dramatically extended the outage. It became the poster child for the danger of single points of failure in the cloud.
And then, less than a month later, it happened again in a different way.
The Cloudflare bot management blackout on November 18th. Cloudflare is the front door for something like 20% of the entire web.
This one hit the AI services hard. OpenAI, Anthropic, X. They all went dark because traffic couldn't even reach them.
And again, it wasn't a hack. It was a software deployment failure. A bug in a new configuration file caused their edge software, the actual computers running in data centers all over the world, to just crash.
So when the software crashed, it just returned that generic, fatal HTTP 500 error to millions of people. A global blockade.
And the irony was just profound. The very system they designed to prevent denial of service attacks
Became the source of a global denial of service.
all because of one bad configuration file. These two events, back to back, were a brutal wake-up call for the industry.
It showed that the internet's plumbing is alarmingly fragile, especially when you're trying to build a future of autonomous agents on top of it.
And while the infrastructure was failing from internal errors, the security situation was failing from just basic negligence.
The data breach epidemic.
This is where we saw trust just completely erode. The Ticketmaster and Snowflake breach was the big one.
560 million customer records stolen by a group called Shiny Hunters.
But again, this wasn't some sophisticated zero-day hack. It was a failure of the most basic access control.
It was a credential stuffing attack, right?
It was. The attackers used a username and password they harvested from a third-party contractor's machine.
And the detail that just shocked everyone.
The contractor's account did not have multi-factor authentication enabled.
MFA.
The front door was just wide open. All you needed was the username and password.
That one detail, no MFA on an account with access to 560 million records, it triggered an immediate industry-wide mandate.
Every CISO in the world started enforcing MFA on every single account, internal or external, the next day.
It really highlighted that the most devastating attacks can be stopped by the simplest security measures that we often ignore.
And it pointed to the bigger credential crisis. In June, researchers found a single consolidated database with 16 billion stolen credentials in it.
16 billion.
Which just proves that the username and password model is fundamentally broken. It's not a secure system anymore.
Which is why we saw such a massive accelerated pivot to passkeys and biometrics this year.
It became an existential necessity. We also saw ransomware get much more targeted and, frankly, more cruel.
The attack on PowerSchool, the education software provider.
They used a terrifying form of double extortion. They didn't just threaten to leak sensitive student data to the public internet.
They threatened to send it directly to individual school districts to maximize the pressure and the pain.
It's a highly targeted, highly psychological attack.
And then the most alarming development was ransomware targeting critical physical infrastructure.
The attack on the Romania energy complex. It forced them to shut down all the IT systems at the country's largest coal power producer.
Which highlights the threat to operational technology, the OT systems that actually run the power grid.
When you shut down the IT, you compromise the ability to safely operate the physical plant. The stakes become life and death.
So if you put it all together, 2025 was the year the world realized that this amazing agentic era is only as strong as its weakest, most mundane link.
Whether that's a timing bug in a DNS server, a missing MFA token, or a single circular dependency.
And as all these failures mounted, it forced governments around the world to react. Which brings us to our next feature, the governance fracture.
That infrastructure instability really set the stage for the geopolitical story of the year.
The governance fracture. This is what created these long-term strategic headaches for every single multinational tech company.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because in 2025, the governance of technology just split down the middle. We saw a sharp ideological divergence between the U.S. and the European Union.
They took fundamentally opposite paths.
Completely opposite. Let's start with the U.S. The new administration came in January and immediately reversed the federal AI policy that had been building up.
They issued Executive Order 14179, and the title says it all. Removing barriers to American leadership in artificial intelligence.
It was a very clear, very rapid pivot to deregulation. It explicitly revoked the previous administration's AI safety mandates.
So things like mandatory safety testing, pre-deployment audits for these big frontier models.
All suspended at the federal level.
And the stated rationale was all about national security and economic competition.
Right. The argument was that the old rules were creating too much friction, that they were stifling the innovation the U.S. needed to stay ahead of China.
And this federal deregulation created a massive policy vacuum,
which the state legislatures rushed to fill. And that's how we ended up with this regulatory patchwork, a total mess for compliance.
New York passed its RAISE Act.
Right. The RAISE Act mandated that developers of these big frontier models had to register their safety protocols with the state and report any critical incidents within 72 hours. A safety-first approach.
And then California followed almost immediately with SB 53, which did something very similar.
Which put developers in this impossible position. Do you follow the state rules and slow down, or do you follow the federal mandate to move fast and risk getting sued by the states?
And this set up a massive constitutional legal battle.
A huge one. The federal government tried to preempt the state laws, arguing that they had sole authority, and the states argued it was their right to protect their citizens.
And that legal fight over who has the right to regulate technology is going to be the dominant story for the next year, at least.
No question. Now, while the U.S. story was deregulation and fragmentation,
the EU story was the complete opposite. It was all about enforcement and solidification.
They moved into the active enforcement phase of their landmark AI Act. This was years in the making, and now it had teeth.
Real deadlines, real prohibitions. In February, the bans on unacceptable risk AI came into force.
Things like social scoring systems, predictive policing tools, outright banned in the EU.
And then in August, the big one, the governance rules for general-purpose AI models took effect.
This meant the providers of those big systemic models, your GPT-5s, your Claude Opuses, they now had to provide incredibly detailed technical documentation.
Submit results from rigorous adversarial testing.
And prove, absolutely, that their training data complied with EU copyright law.
So the result of this massive divergence was that every big tech company had to adopt what they called a bifurcated strategy.
They had to. They were basically forced to build two versions of their products, an unrestricted, move-fast version for the US.
And a separate, highly compliant, and often slightly less capable version for the European market to avoid these massive fines.
And the cost of that compliance was so high that some companies, like Apple and Meta, just delayed releasing their most advanced AI features in the EU altogether.
They decided it just wasn't worth the risk.
Which created this noticeable gap in functionality between what a user in the US could do versus a user in Europe.
And speaking of governance, the U.S. antitrust philosophy also saw a really interesting shift.
Right. The Department of Justice cleared Google's $32 billion acquisition of Wiz, the cloud security company.
Under any prior administration, a deal that big a tech giant buying a leader in a critical adjacent market, it would have faced an enormous, probably fatal antitrust challenge.
Absolutely. The approval signaled a clear philosophical shift. It showed a prioritization of national competitiveness over traditional market concentration concerns.
The argument was that, to compete globally and defend against foreign cyber threats, U.S. champions like Google needed to be able to acquire best-in-class security.
And that national security argument won out over the antitrust concerns.
So this whole segment just shows that technology is no longer just a business story, it's a story of diverging national priorities.
And companies are now caught in the middle of this geopolitical chessboard, trying to decide whether to optimize for speed, like the US, or for safety, like the EU.
And that geopolitical pressure, that need to spend billions on AI infrastructure to stay competitive, is exactly what drove the massive corporate restructuring we saw in 2025.
It was a bizarre year, wasn't it? Record-breaking acquisitions happening at the exact same time as huge targeted layoffs.
The M&A renaissance was all about one thing, building the complete end-to-end AI stack.
The Google and Wiz deal we just talked about, $32 billion. That was about integrating security so deeply into the cloud that it wasn't an add-on anymore. It was part of the foundation.
And then we saw Salesforce buy Informatica for $8 billion. This was a direct play for the agentic era.
Absolutely. It was all about data hygiene. Your autonomous agents are useless if they're running on garbage data.
Right.
By buying Informatica, Salesforce bought the piping. They secured the tools needed to make sure clean, reliable, compliant data was flowing into their Agentforce platform. They bought the fuel for their future agents.
And the spending spree continued, Meta buying Manishu for $2 billion. The message was clear. Secure the talent and the foundational tech to automate labor, no matter the cost.
And yet, at the same time, the tech sector shed over 126,000 jobs in 2025.
It's an unsettling contradiction.
It is. And these weren't your typical recession-driven cuts. These were strategic reallocations.
Exactly. Profitable giants like Microsoft and Amazon cut thousands of jobs.
15,000 and 14,000, respectively.
But they cut them in their legacy divisions. Hardware, physical retail, older IT functions.
And the reason they made those cuts was explicitly to free up cash to fund the massive capital expenditure for AI.
For new data centers, for buying more GPUs, for hiring expensive AI engineers.
The message to the workforce was stark. If your job doesn't directly contribute to the AI pipeline, it's at risk. For a company like Intel, their 22,000 job cuts were just existential. They were trying to preserve capital for their manufacturing turnaround.
On a more positive note, the IPO market finally thawed out.
Thank goodness. After a long freeze, we saw big mature companies like Stripe and Databricks finally go public.
Stripe at a $65 billion valuation, Databricks at $43 billion.
And that provided this crucial injection of liquidity back into the venture capital ecosystem, which was starving for returns. That cash gets recycled into the next generation of startups.
So while the corporate world was shuffling its balance sheets, consumers were out there running their own real-world tests on all this new technology.
It's the consumer verdict. This is where the rubber really meets the road.
And nothing illustrates the limits of fragile automation better than the fast food drive-thru.
Oh, the Taco Bell saga.
Taco Bell had to scale back their ambitious AI voice ordering systems after all those viral videos of spectacular failures.
We all saw the one where the customer was just desperately trying to correct an order that the AI had misinterpreted as a request for 18,000 cups of water.
It's hilarious, but the business lesson is dead serious.
It is. The last mile of automation, That messy, chaotic interaction with a real human is the hardest part.
In a high-variance environment with accents, background noise, people changing their minds, a flexible human is often just cheaper and more reliable than a brittle AI.
We also saw this really stark, immediate A/B test in the wearables market.
It was a perfect case study. On one side, you had Meta's Ray-Ban smart glasses, which were a clear success.
And the key was subtlety. They looked like stylish glasses that just happened to have a camera and an AI you could talk to if you wanted. They didn't demand your attention.
And on the other side, you had the Friend AI necklace, a total failure.
It was marketed as a cure for loneliness, an always-on companion, but everyone just saw it for what it was, a surveillance device.
The reviews were brutal. People said it was socially intrusive, constantly recording conversations, and it didn't even work well in noisy places.
And that experience established a very clear boundary for consumers. AI in social settings needs to be passive. It needs to wait to be called upon. It can't just be listening all the time.
Finally, we saw a huge hardware pivot from Apple, driven entirely by their AI ambitions.
The iPhone 17, for the first time, the base model included the 120 Hz promotion display.
A feature that was always reserved for the expensive Pro models before.
And that wasn't just them being generous. It was a technical necessity. To run the powerful on-device AI features in Apple Intelligence smoothly, without lag, you need that high refresh rate display.
And it worked. It drove a massive consumer upgrade supercycle because people wanted access to those new on-device AI features. It proved that software is now dictating hardware requirements.
So on the corporate side, it was all about reallocating capital to the AI stack. And on the consumer side, it was about rejecting fragility and rejecting intrusion.
When you step back and look at all these themes together, the efficiency shock, the agentic trust gap, the infrastructure failures, the governance fracture, it really paints a clear picture.
Year of recalibration.
It really was. If we try to synthesize everything we've talked about, it feels like the industry learned 3 core inescapable lessons this year.
I agree. The first, driven by DeepSeek, is simply efficiency over excess.
The brute force era is over.
It's over. DeepSeek proved that smart algorithms can trump sheer scale. We can now get state-of-the-art reasoning for a tiny fraction of the old cost, which opens the door for startups and global competition in a way that wasn't possible before.
Okay, lesson number 2.
Infrastructure matters. The AWS and Cloudflare outages were a brutal lesson that your amazing autonomous agents are completely useless if the underlying plumbing is broken.
Reliability and redundancy are no longer optional. They're the price of admission.
They're table stakes for any serious enterprise automation.
And the third lesson, which feels the most human, is that trust is the currency.
Absolutely. Whether it's an IT department refusing to give an agent right access to a database or a consumer rejecting an intrusive necklace, adoption hinges entirely on reliability.
And on enforcing basic security hygiene, like MFA.
And on fundamentally respecting user privacy and control. Without that trust, none of the rest of it matters.
Looking back, what surprised you the most this year?
It was the sheer simplicity of why the big infrastructure failed. We're all braced for these complex nation-state hacks.
Right.
But AWS and Cloudflare were taken down by basic configuration bugs and timing issues. It's a sobering reminder that massive systems fail in the most mundane, human ways.
For me, it was the speed of the federal deregulation in the U.S. That immediate pivot to a move fast mentality really caught a lot of people off guard and created that huge state versus federal conflict.
And what normalized really quickly?
The concept of the AI agent. Even as a co-pilot, the idea of a digital employee pursuing a goal across different apps, that just became standard.
I agree. And chain of thought reasoning went from a novel research paper idea to just an expected feature of any competitive model.
It all just shows how deeply technology is now shaping everything, from the literal price of intelligence to the security steps you have to take to buy a concert ticket.
It's woven into the fabric of everything. Before we look ahead, I think we should thank our final sponsor.
We should. This special edition is also brought to you by Skony, the premium golf shoe store. Skony really believes that performance and style should go hand in hand.
On and off the course, their shoes are built for maximum comfort and stability, designed for peak performance through every swing.
So if you're looking to elevate your game with some truly high-performance footwear, you should visit Skony.com.
And Skony is offering our listeners 15% off their entire purchase when they use the promo code SNARFUL at checkout.
That's the code SNARFUL, SNARFUL, for 15% off your entire purchase at Skony.com.
So carrying all these lessons from 2025 forward, what grounded trends do you see defining the next 12 months? Where does this recalibration lead us?
I think there are three big ones that flow directly from this year. First, in quantum computing, I see the qubit quality race.
Mirroring the efficiency shock in AI.
Exactly. After all the skepticism around some of the big announcements this year, the focus is shifting. It's no longer about who has the most qubits, it's about who has the best qubits, prioritizing fidelity and quality over sheer quantity.
It's another example of efficiency over excess. What's the second one?
The second is a direct consequence of those outages, the mandate for multi-cloud resilience.
It's not a preference anymore, it's a requirement.
It's
true. And it taught us that technology often moves forward on these two separate parallel tracks.
What do you mean by that?
Well, on one track, you have the high-risk physical frontier. You have SpaceX finally succeeding with the chopstick catch of their super heavy booster.
An incredible engineering achievement.
It is. And it's all about prioritizing speed and rapid reusability to bring down costs. It's a move fast and break things.
Yep.
Philosophy applied to giant rockets.
Okay, so that's one track.
And on the other track, you have NASA delaying the Artemis II mission again, pushing it to 2026 because of concerns about the heat shield safety.
Prioritizing astronaut safety above all else.
Exactly. Technology moves forward, but it often does so by making a choice between those two tracks, prioritizing speed or prioritizing safety. And I think that divergence and the necessity of making that choice is what really defined this year of recalibration.
It was a fascinating year of hard-won lessons.
It certainly was.
We're here to help at Snarful, so reach out on our website if you have any more questions.
That's a wrap on today's top stories. Remember, tech doesn't have to be complicated, and we're here to help connect the dots. If you've got questions or want to learn more, visit us at snarful.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.